I'm sharing my screen. So during last discussion, uh, we went through Spring Data JPA and Spring Data JDBC also for doing CRUD operations. Okay. Yeah, just a minute. Yeah. So what we understand is when we use Spring Data JPA, when you compare with the plain ORM, while using plain ORM, right? We used to define session factory, Hibernate template. To create session factory or Hibernate template, we used to create some configurations for Hibernate, including your database connection properties. We used to put Hibernate properties. From there, we used to create a session factory using configuration class, and using session factory, we used to create Hibernate template. Then we used to auto-wire that Hibernate template wherever we want into DAO classes. Then we used to execute CRUD operations in plain ORM. But when you go with Spring Data JPA, that efforts are reduced here. You need not to do all that stuff. You can avoid this beans creation and DAO implementation also. Okay, it will reduce a lot of burden if it can reduce DAO implementation, right? Majorly as a developer, apart from the business logic, right, we used to spend a lot of time on database part also. Though it is a basic CRUD operation, save, update, delete, select kind of operations, right? When we are working on a project where we have tables like 10 or 20 tables, you need to spend good amount of time to implement a DAO, whereas that is reduced here. You can use existing repositories here to provide database code implementation. I mean, you need not to write anything, just you have to create an interface just by extending JPA repository. Okay, and yeah, for different types of databases we have different repositories to extend. For SQL databases you can use JPA repository. For NoSQL repositories also we have. All that you need to do is you need to create one interface. Your interface should extend from JPA repository, and you need to give your entity and the primary key data type. If it is a simple primary key, you can give. If it is a composite primary key, you can give composite primary key bean as well here. Okay, anyway, so once you do that, what you can do, you can auto wire that JPA repository. Yeah, so why it mentioned here is this implementation by default will be provided by JPA repository. Implementation will be provided by Spring automatically during runtime for your class. So just you can auto wire your interface wherever you want in your business layer. You can auto wire and you can execute the required CRUD operations. Just from business class you can run them. Okay, let me show you. Okay, we will do one end-to-end REST application. Okay, end-to-end REST application with REST based controllers and business class and DAOs. Okay, let's see how to implement it. Okay, carefully observe. This use case will helpful, right, for your regular implementations. Okay, simple student CRUD operation we will do, end to end student CRUD operation. We will implement using REST controller, or else you can have a web controller also. We know if it is a web controller, we can have a web page. Just bear with me, machine is little slow. Okay, student CRUD operations we will perform here. Student CRUD operation we will perform here. I'll just use REST only. Okay, I'll just use REST only here. And for testing, okay, we will implement here student CRUD operation using REST and Data JPA. Just a minute, let me make it big. REST with Data JPA. We will do this. Okay, if you want web, you can, in place of REST, you can include web with Data JPA. Okay, anything should be fine. Yeah, now let's assume that I have a front end. I'm getting data. Let's assume in REST we don't have any front end, but you need to assume name, email, address, fields I am getting, and I want to save this data in my database. Okay, consider this is a form, but as we cannot able to have form in REST based, right? You can use Postman tool to test it. Okay, here instead of this front end form, right, we will be using Postman to send the data. Okay, so either you may have front end, or from Postman we can use for testing, right, to post this data to backend class. So you need to have one backend class here, REST controller. REST controller, and here you can have multiple methods for CRUD operation, right? For insert, I'll use post mapping here. Okay, post mapping for save operation. And you can have common URL, as I'm dealing with the student, right? I can have at the rate request mapping on top of class. You can have common request mapping here for all the methods. Student is my request mapping. Just a minute. And inside class you can have multiple methods. Post mapping, for save operation you can use. Put mapping for update. Get a default get mapping for select all you can use. Get mapping with parameter. Okay, maybe a path variable you can take here. Okay, one path variable you can take here, id /id. Okay, along with student slash one number if I pass, that will consider like select single record method, this get mapping. Okay, put mapping is for update use case. Get mapping is for select all records. Get mapping with id is for select one record. And if you want to delete a record, you can have delete mapping annotation. Where do we need to put all these annotations? Means on top of your methods. Here also you can have path variable if you want to delete a record. Right, we covered post, put, get, delete. What else we can have? Right, almost all CRUD methods we have: select, insert, update, delete. So you can have all such methods here, and the common URL is student/student. So whenever I call a simple get method from postman with /student, it will hit get all, select all mapping by default will be executed if I use get from postman. If I use post from postman, if I use post from postman, just a minute. Yeah, so for default, when you do simple get operation with the /student, it will execute this one. If you do post operation, if your HTTP method is post, it will execute post mapping. Basically post mapping we use for save operation or insert operation, okay, to insert data or to save data into database. For insert you can use post, and if you use put option from postman, okay, it will call put mapping with same URL /student, okay, same URL but with different behaviors. If you use get, it will execute get mapping. If you use post method, it will execute post mapping. If you use put, it will execute put mapping. If you call get method only along with ID in URL, instead of executing this method, default method, it will execute a get mapping method with ID 1. Okay. If you use delete method with this parameter, right, delete method with the parameter, it will execute this delete mapping method. Okay, so it depends on the parameters that we submit from postman or from form. In form also we can have different methods, not only post, you can have get, put, right, delete mappings. Okay, you can explore more about these HTTP methods. What is the meaning of post mapping? In interviews you generally get this question, right? So what is the difference between post and put mapping? What we can do with post, what we can do with put? Okay, so as you have various different methods here, each method have a purpose. Okay, each HTTP method has a purpose. Generally we use post for insert operation, put for update, get for select, delete for delete operations. So once we get the data here in the form of DTO, how we will get data into the REST controller? In the form of DTO, whichever method is called. Let's say post mapping need to insert a data, so we will accept this data in the form of DTO. So we will get input here as a DTO, we will get data as a DTO into post mapping method, we will get as a DTO here. For insert, even for update also we will expect, you can expect a DTO here, you can expect a DTO object into post mapping, simple data transfer object. For get, you need not to give any input, it need to return you. So as a return, get mapping also will return you a DTO object. You need to return DTO as a return from get mapping. Here also list of DTOs we will return here in get all. In simple get we will give simple DTO. In delete mapping we don't return anything, just it will give void. We keep void here, so that means we are not returning anything, or else you can put any message, success or fail, something if you want to send. So once we get the data here into the REST controller will invoke service class here. It will invoke service class. So I can have a service class here with @service method. Okay, @service annotation on top of class. And you can have for each CRUD operation again a business method, maybe create student, update student, delete student, select one, select all. You can have all your business methods here. Just what you need to do is here you need to call from your methods. Post mapping will pass this DTO here, whichever object getting from input, it will pass here and it will execute create method or update method or delete, select methods, select all, select one, delete. Once we call service method, service will invoke your DAO. As we understand from Data JPA, we just create an interface here. No implementation is required. Just we will have an interface. Okay, and you need not to use any repository annotation also here. Okay, you can have a simple repository class student repo, not even a class, it is a interface. We will have a repository interface here, and this will be implemented, extended from JPA repository. And you know what you need to do here. You need to pass here your entity, not DTO object. You need to pass entity with your primary key. Bus. You need not to provide any implementation. So for default CRUD operations, we are talking about default CRUD operations, right? Select one record, select all records, or updating a record, or inserting a record, or deleting a record. Most of the methods are available here. Okay, you want to save, so basic save operation is available. So save method by default will do save and as well as update, right? This save method, your repository save method will do both save and update. If you want to delete, we have a delete method, so you can pass any entity, it will delete. For deleting a record, to delete a record we have delete method, and to select a record we have find. We have a find method. If you want to select a record we have find methods. We have find method, find by ID or find by name. You can use find by ID by default available, find by primary key, this one is. So you can use find by ID. It will give one record. Okay, it will give one record whichever you want, because ID we are getting input here, right? Same ID you can pass to select one, and that same ID you can pass to find by ID. It will take input, your primary key input. Select all. For select all we have find all methods. For select all we have find all method. So find all method you can use for select operation. What else we want? For delete we have delete, right? So most of the methods are by default available until unless you have any sorting or pagination or a join. If you have any complex queries, until unless you have a complex queries, you can use default repository methods which are by default available. You need not to implement them. Okay, so let's see how we can implement it. Okay, let me switch to our workspace, or I can create here new other SpringBoot project, SpringBoot starter, student REST service. Okay, I'm creating a REST service. Next, yeah, you need to include web, right? You need to include web. and I want to connect with Arkill database. So Arkill driver, I want to use Data JPA, so add this. And if you want this Lombok annotations, right, better include it. And for automatic restarts I will use SpringBoot DevTools, but for now I'll use them. And let's create a project. So project is getting created. Okay, it went to bottom. Yeah, student rest service. Okay, so default com.rb.ecom with the @springboot application, and default form.xml file with the dependencies. Okay, Data JPA added, web added, DevTools added, and JDBC library added, and Lombok. Default testing library always will be available here. Okay, and now first thing, let's keep DB properties here, database properties, URL, username, password, that are first we need to put here. Okay, let me copy. So if you want to work with MySQL also, you can try. Okay, if you want, I'll use MySQL here, and HBM to DDL. If table is not exist, it will create. So data source, we are asking to use DBCP, but yeah, anything you can use. Driver class, this is MySQL driver. If you want to use Arkill, you can use Arkill. We included Arkill, right? So we cannot use this, or else let's upgrade it to, let's change this to MySQL. Anything should be fine. Okay, you can play with it. Add status, or else directly go to POM and remove it. Just a minute. MySQL, you can add MySQL driver, then we will remove Arkill driver. We can have multiple databases also. Okay, sometimes your application may need more than one database. In such scenario, you can have multiple database drivers here, no issue. Okay, but you need to have different configurations in your application. Okay, maybe different profiles we need to maintain, or else different beans we need to create, okay, just by customizing our properties. Let me comment this Archil driver or remove it. Okay, just configured MySQL here, that should be fine. So here in MySQL you can have a different new schema, student API something schema I am creating. Okay, if this schema is not available it may not function, so use MySQL workbench and create new schema, or you may use MySQL command prompt also, MySQL command line client also, you can use whichever is comfortable. So root show databases. Okay, these are the list of databases. I need to create a database. Create a DB student API. Create a DB or database. Okay, create database student API created. This is the visual representation. Okay, if you don't want command prompt, install MySQL workbench. So here also you can see show databases. Okay, list of databases it is showing. Use student API database. Yeah, again here you can see tables, show tables. Is there any table in this API database? No tables created yet. Same command you can use from your command prompt also. Okay, use student API. No tables created yet. Okay, fine. Now no table, nothing available. So first thing that you need to do is you need to start with your entity. Okay, once we get the requirement, what all you need to do is start with your entity. com.rb.ecom. I'm creating a package called entity package or model package, you can use any naming convention. So for my requirement I need a student entity, so let me create a student. @entity, and if you want a specific table names, you don't want this name as a table, I want to create a table name, student, something like this I want to create, and schema, your DB name you can mention here, student API. So every entity must have a primary key. Okay, without primary key Hibernate or JPA will not function. Your bean should have a primary key or composite primary key. Okay, so you can have here integer or long or string based or composite primary key, any data type you can have. So student long ID. So you need to specify immediately @ID. So that means it will understand this ID property as a primary key, and to generate a default generated value you can use here strategy apply auto and see how it will work. private string name, email and address. Along with them you need getters and setters, that is very important. So instead of that I'll use Lombok data annotation. Okay, it will provide getter and setter, along with that required argument constructor, toString, equals and hash code methods also it is providing. Okay, if you want constructors also you can define here, no issues. All argument constructor, no argument constructor. Okay, so if you want to pass at a time all these parameters, maybe you can use all argument constructor and pass. Okay, yeah, now entity is created. Then next thing immediately what you need to do is create a repository class. So create a package com.repo package. Okay, so repository interface, student repo, just a interface, extend from JPA repository. Same example, okay, we'll do it in multiple databases. Student and my data type, there it is, long. That's it, don't add any code here. A plain repository interface. So entity created, repository created. Okay, so if you see here, we started implementation from backend, right? In the backend, last component, first created entity, then a repository. Now you need to create service. Okay, create service class. Create a service package and have a student service. If you want interface implementation model, as we discussed in Spring Basics, you can have first a student interface, then implementation also. Okay, if you want to follow complete inversion of controlling, if you want to achieve like runtime polymorphism, right, you can create student service interface first with all your required methods. Okay, methods signature public. After save I want to return student DAO, DTO, create student DTO input I want to take, and save it. As this DTO is not available, it is asking to create. Let me create DTO also. Okay, under service package, or you may create one more DTO package also, student DTO. There also you can have same parameters. Okay, same parameters at the rate of data. ID is not okay, ID is also required, but user may not enter ID. During return you may put ID and return it. String name, email, address, bus. So you can have a create method, update, select one, select all, and delete methods we need. Update, delete, For delete, simple ID is enough. Once deleted, nothing to return. Find one, find all. In find all, no input is required. Find all may return list of DTOs. You know why I created interface. Okay, for this interface, if I can provide implementation between controller and service, we can achieve loosely coupling. Now I will provide implementation of the student service. Student service, implement it from this interface. Okay, it is overriding all these methods with no implementation. Now you provide implementation. First let's put this service annotation, and you need to auto wire the repository also. You need to auto wire your repository also. Student repository, student repository, let's make it private student repository. You use auto wire. So as Sonar always recommend us to use instead of making it auto wired, it will recommend us use to constructor based dependency injection. Okay, so you can use parameterized constructor also here. Student service with the parameterized constructor, and assign this variable to instance level variable. So by default, when you use this also, auto wiring will be performed by default. Parameterized dependency, parameterized constructor, when you use, it will inject it. So when you use this way, Sonar will not give any issues. When you use auto wire based, Sonar will recommend us to go with okay, constructor based dependency injection. And as nobody need to change anything from your repo class, make it final. So it is a strict final class. You can't do anything with that except using it for CRUD operations. Okay, so this is the best way that you can use. And here you can implement now create method. What you need to do for create, I am getting DTO input, but for doing save operation I need a student object, right? DTO.save will take only student entity, not DTO. This is my entity class, new student. Here I need to pass ID, name, email, address, which are coming from this DTO. So DTO anyway it will not bring any ID here, and I need not to use that ID because ID is auto generated. DTO dot get name, DTO dot get email, DTO dot get address. You shift the data from DTO to this entity and call save method. So as soon as it is saved, it will return primary key as a return value. Okay, so you can expect your primary key here in this object, which is auto generated. So as DTO is already having name, email, address, set that newly generated ID here and return DTO back to customer or user, whoever called it. Same way you can do for update scenario also, but in update case, to ensure that same save method only you need to use, but to ensure that this entity is already available, you need to check if entity available, then only update. Let's say Vasu entering his record to update, but his record is not there in database. Okay, he is trying to use update method. Then what will happen if you have implementation like this? Though his record is not available, it will create and it will say success, your record is updated, it will say, but that is not really update, it will save it. As this method wanted to update existing record, update always will perform on existing record, so you need to check whether that record is exist or not. So you can use if student repository dot exist by id, checking exist by id, give dto dot get id, pass id, if exist then continue with this and return dto, if not return null or throw exception, return null or throw exception. Here you better throw exception instead of null, saying that record is not available, record is not available. So if you want to throw exception, you can use throw new user not found exception, record not available, please check. So you may throw exception here, and you can create this class user not found exception class, maybe in util package, wherever you want. Okay, user not found write how to create exception classes, and I need parameterized constructor also here. I'll use Spring Data annotation here, not Spring Data, Lombok. Yeah, all argument constructor bus, maybe data annotation not required, use a toString method bus. Unhandled exception, so throw user not found declaration. So as it is there in the interface, go to your interface, add the same signature. Even for delete case also it may be required, when you try to find one also it may be required if record is not available, when it should find if record is exist. Okay, now yeah, so update is ensuring whether record exists, then only it is functioning. Delete also same thing you need to do, if exist then only delete, if not exist, why you should unnecessarily fire a delete operation on database, not required. Okay, so you may delete now here, you may delete it, just pass id, just give id, okay, student dot set id, and which method we need to use, delete method. Okay, delete will not return anything. Yeah, if not exist, if exist, okay, it will execute, else case, in else scenario you may throw exception. here as I have written here as a last statement, without else I can write this here, but in this scenario I don't have any return, right? That's why I added else. Find one, maybe apply same thing for find one. It is a select operation. First let's see whether the record is exist or not. If record is exist, then maybe you can return student repository dot find by id, right? Find by id, pass id. Okay, this is expecting DTO, right? You need to convert this anyway. So you'll be getting into student object. From student to DTO conversion you need to do here. Okay, student to DTO, new student to DTO. Here also add all argument constructor, no argument constructor. So here I can pass student dot get ID, get name, get email, get address, just mapping result into DTO, because this is what I need to return finally. Return DTO. So if no record, throw perfectly a exception. Throw exception. Okay. So find by ID returning optional of student. Okay. So optional type it is getting. So what you need to do, from optional to student, you need to get it. Student equal to student optional dot get. So find one is also implemented. Now and the last one is find all. So you get a list of student entities here from repository. Student repo dot find all. So list of students it will return. So what all you need to do is you need to convert from list to DTO object, DTO list actually, DTO list. So iterate through it and keep it into this list. Okay. So for each list you will be getting a student object, and I will put data from student to DTO object. Student to DTO, new student to DTO, student dot get ID, get name, get email, get address. Add that to DTO list. Bus. Finally you can return DTO list object. That's it. Once you're done with your service implementation, implement your REST now. Create a package com.rbu.econ.rest package, student REST controller. keep annotation here at the rate rest controller, at the rate request mapping, a default mapping I'm adding here for all the methods. Student, if I start with save, public response entity, student to DTO. So we return always data in the form of response entity. Okay, I'll explain it more. Create any method you can use here. Post method, student post, or create student. Any business naming conventions also you can use. So here you will be getting DTO object. You can use at the rate request body and student to DTO. Directly your data will fall into this DTO object. For that you need not to do any request.get, all that operations. And here you need service object, which is auto-wired. Instead of auto-wire we use constructor based dependency injection. But if you are comfortable with auto-wired, you can use student service. Instead of student service we will use student service interface, and I'll have a constructor here. Okay, so student service object will be auto-wired here. You can use it as it is. So to save we have create method, pass DTO input, and you will be getting DTO again response. But finally my return type is response entity. Let's see, plain DTO also I can return by keeping DTO as a response here. But what it will tell, just it can carry your response object. Along with that, if it want to tell some message like I created it successfully, or so and so exception I got, something it want to express from backend to front end, response entity is a most useful object. How? You can say return new response entity. Here in response entity you can pass your object, as well as HTTP status codes also we can send. HTTP status codes also we can send. Okay, what all we have? HTTP status codes, HTTP status dot, yeah, see so many parameters. As this method is for create request, you can use response 201 created. Generally we use, I mean by default when you return without this response entity, for all methods it will give 200, which is success. We will say success. So instead of that we have different types. For created we can use 201 response code. So for that you can use HTTP status code created. So you will see the same status code in front end also when we get response that is created. Same way update student. Okay, I forget mapping annotations. Post mapping. For update you use put mapping. So here service interface dot update method. Okay, it is throwing exception unhandled, add throws declaration. I am throwing it as it is. You may put question, this exception may be received to the user, yes. Okay, we can have a different discussion to handle these exceptions also. Okay, that is also one question in interview. They will ask how you will implement these exceptions. Same way only we will implement. Finally we will add one global advisor. There it will read this exception and it will convert into a different message that we will see. So this is update method. Delete, use delete mapping. So in case of delete, nothing expecting, void. And in case of update, maybe you can use a different status code, accepted. For update you given record, I accepted it. So for delete, you may have delete code also. Do we have deleted? No. You may say maybe accepted or OK also you can use. Delete, OK. And finally I want to return void. So for delete, ID is enough. Okay, so ID, what, how we will get as a path parameter we will get, okay, slash ID along with the student URL. While coming request, right, it will come like this, student slash one number will come along with that ID. So example, the request is like localhost colon port number slash student slash one number. So then it will hit this method. So you may have here what we have, path param or path variable. Okay, let me use path variable. Long ID. So it will be kept into this ID variable. You can pass that ID to this delete method. That's it. Not expecting anything, just void. Response entity is void. Response entity with the status code, http status code dot array. Okay, bus. Find one, same way, find get method, get mapping with the path variable. If I get, that means one record I want to find one student. Return value is DTO, student DTO. So for find one, you know you have a method find one. If you give ID, it will give you DTO object. ID and the status code, http status dot, maybe okay. Same thing you can apply for get all also. In case of get all, you need not to pass any path variable. Find all student. Here in this case I will be expecting list of student DTOs, many DTOs. So instead of find one, we have find all. That's it. So we have all the rest methods also. Okay, so if you see, first we started with the simple entity. We created all the variables with the default generated value, and we given required table name and database name, the MySQL schema we given, and it is mandatory to have entity annotation. Okay, forget about table, entity is required, but if you want your custom table, use at the rate table also. And you know, these are Lombok annotations for setters and getters and constructors. Once done with that, create a repository interface. No implementation. See, we have done lot of implementation in service and controller part, but DTO, it saved lot of time. Otherwise here you should have done a lot of code. It saved a lot of time to us. And service, so before going to provide service implementation, I given a interface here to achieve loosely coupling between controller and service. From that interface we implemented a service class, and instead of auto wiring based dependency injection, here we are using constructor based dependency injection, which is recommended. And all the CRUD operation methods added here for save, getting DTO data and putting it into student entity and saving it, and returning the DTO. For update scenario, we are finding whether this record is exist already in database or not, then only we are updating. Okay, for safety purpose we are checking it first. If record is not available, directly we are throwing exception. Same scenario with the delete also. If record is not available, you need not to entertain, you can throw exception. Same with the find record also. If record is not available, from where we can get the data, so throw exception. If record is available, then return it. And find by ID will return optional type object. From optional, to get the actual object, you need to use optional dot get method. So it is one of the functional interface, right? Producer type. Optional is a producer type. So from that we are getting the data, and for find all we are using simple find all method and getting data, converting data into DTO type here and returning it. Same stuff we are calling from our controller. Here we auto wired interface. If you see here, we auto wired interface. Even in service class also we auto wired interface only. But general Java cannot able to create any object for interfaces. So this interface student repo will have a implementation at runtime. That implementation object will be injected here. Same with your controller also. But here in this scenario we implemented. We've given a implementation. So this implementation will be injected. Now you can test it. Hopefully it should function. We have all the required parameters, student API to reconnect SSL, okay, root update, okay, port number maybe server dot port is equal to, keep available port number here and run it. No extra annotations, nothing. Code is getting executed, and yeah, in 9090 it is available. Now use Postman to test it. We don't have any front end now. We implemented a pure REST based. As I don't have front end, from browser I can maybe call select method, get and get all methods. Apart from that, post to delete I can't execute from there. So you may use Postman or any similar to this tool. Is it important? Okay. Sign in with the Google. You have onboarded. Thank you. Okay. So let's see here. I'm creating a new request. First we need to save record. Use post option here and enter your URL, localhost something like this, 9090/student. So you need to construct a request here. You need to construct a request body. Okay, similar to this. Body, choose raw type, and I am sending JSON. Default your REST controller will accept JSON name. Send some name here. Send email here. Name, email, address we have. Right, ID not required. It will return you ID as a response back. So let's send and see the name, email and address. Request is going and response came back. See, status code 201 returned. In general, if you don't put any HTTP status code, we will get always 200 only, but it's a good practice that you should have proper HTTP status codes. And in the return also you can see the auto generated ID it returned. So using this postman script I can insert all of your records. Even you can try this. If I can give you access, you can try this. See, second record also got created. So your data must be inserting into MySQL database. Your data must be inserting into MySQL database. Go to workbench and show tables. Now ask to show tables. So one student, RBU student table created and one sequence also created. Surprisingly, we used auto, right? So one sequence is getting created in MySQL and it is generating ID from here to avoid the issues in ID generation, right? You know what is the problem with the simple incrementation, will create a lot of problems. So if I see select, I got two records here. Two records got inserted here. You can see this, right? Yeah. So same way you can test other methods also. Now we used only post method, so I can able to save the data. Same way, one more method to delete it. Already I have data, same URL, I'm not changing anything. I want to update it, so use put mapping. In real time it will work it in a different way. I'll explain that. Okay, if we have front end, then you may understand scenarios, but yeah, that we will do later. JSON. So in put method, generally from front end only we will get request, right? Nobody use postman in production. So from front end, what they will do, for the existing JSON object they will add the changes, whatever changes you want. Vasu Gmail we have, so I want to change it to ymail.com, and Vasu ABC I want to add with the same ID. You need to submit it with same ID. You need to submit whatever record you want to change it. Existing data as it is you need to put here. Fields whichever you want to change, you change it. And here method, if you observe, we are using put method. In case of post, I never submitted ID, but in put you must send ID. With this ID only we are identifying whether this record is available or not also, right? So ID is mandatory, otherwise update function will not work. Send it. 202 accepted. We got message 202 accepted, and it is showing that the name and email got changed. You can check that name and email got changed. I can see that here. And now if you want to, now we saw post method, put method for update, post method for create, put method for update, and we have two select methods. First do that. I'm using get method with the simple URL. Okay, as I was saying, we can test it in browser also, right? If it is a get method. So you may go to browser and you can put your URL here. By default browser always will execute get functionality only. What happened to you? 500 internal error. Okay, for find all did we added, where is the find all? By default get student with no parameter should execute get all method, right? Yes, it is available. Acha, still we mentioned path variable, not really required, just changing it. Okay, application is getting restarted automatically. Now you can test it. Hopefully data should be available. Yeah, now you can see we have data here, ID, both the records, ID, name, email address. If you want to select one record, just put slash give ID. You will get one record only here. Okay, only these two methods I can test, get and get all from my browser. Same thing you can test from your Postman also. I given simple get URL, response status code is okay, and I'm getting both the records here. In case if I pass one ID here, I can get that particular record here. This is how you can test all your methods. Finally, let's see delete method. Okay, let's see delete method. Here what you need to use is just go to delete, give your URL with ID. Let's say I'll give ID 3, that ID is not existed. See, it is throwing exception, user not found exception. Generally we should not send this trace to end user, but it's okay, it is working as expected. Whichever ID I given, that record is not at all available. So if I give ID which is available, then only it will execute, and expecting nothing, just void, just getting 200. Okay, fine, I'm getting okay, that is fine. Now if I go and see records, must be one record is deleted. Finally I have only one here. So this is how you can implement a REST implementation. Even in microservices also we do the same on daily basis, right? So we implement we create a JPA repository, then we create a DTOs, DAOs, service, REST. This is how we implement it. This is not too complicated, right, to do. It is simple basically. But behind the scene what's happening, JPA creating one connection pool for you. Out of it is creating, right, it is creating connection pool, as well as it is providing implementation for your DAO. Lot of burden has been reduced there. And anyway, we can't avoid this controller or business, as we need to customize them always. You need to implement them, but the same passion, right? If you see, for controllers also they can provide a default interface based implementation, but yet that type not provided. Okay, just a minute, guys. Yeah, so yeah, this is the best way to implement any REST API, okay, from repository to controller. Okay, this is how we will implement all the CRUD operations. Okay, this example must be useful. Okay, get some hands-on this example. Okay, 99% of time, 99 you know uh, within our application, right, we don't get much opportunity to work on remaining, but you will have similar CRUD operation stuff on daily basis. Same thing you may need to implement. Okay, I'll share this example.